Hello again, I am Blunty, and the gizmo on my review table today is a new point-and-shoot camera from Nikon. Now let's be honest here, point-and-shoot cameras are very handy things to have, but they're not usually very interesting, are they? And their existence is increasingly under fire from ever more capable smartphone cameras. And the thing that makes this, the Nikon S800C, worthy of falling under my gaze is that it's running on top of a full-on Android experience. So you get to keep all the modern nifty toys of phone photography, the apps, the filters, the editing, and of course the ability to instantly share your creations with the online world, whether they be simple snapshots of a fun day or more thoughtful and artistic snappery. And you get a camera with a lot less compromises built on top of that. Now obviously those with smartphones will know that startup time from a complete power off can take a while, and what you really want from your camera is to be ready to snap off a shot within moments of hitting that power button, or you risk missing capturing a once in a lifetime moment. The answer here is the S800C boots immediately into a basic camera mode while the full Android system boots in the background. This immediate mode is very limited, but it works perfectly well for when you just need to snap off a shot real fast. Of course, once Android is booted, you get all of your power and features that you're used to seeing in Android, and just like on your phone, you can keep it in standby mode to keep your Android humming along while it's in your pocket or whatever, so it's instantly available to you from then on in. But the question now becomes, why buy something like this when you've probably already got a decent smartphone camera with the software and toys on board already? The S800C has two answers for that. The first one is it's made by Nikon, one of the best in the business when it comes to sucking in good-looking photos. Meanwhile, many phone manufacturers are still kind of tripping over less than optimal lens design and tiny sensors chosen to be good enough but no better. So just knowing that Nikon built this thing is a big plus right off the bat, because, they know what they're doing when it comes to cameras, it's fair to say. The second answer is the compact zoom lens. This alone delivers to you titanically more creative control and power, and no phone out there can match it on that score. So, is this the camera that social media addicted scamps have been waiting for? Well, yes and no. And here's why. I was very happy with much of what I got out of this camera. For a get-go, it was wildly better in low light than any camera phone I've ever tested, and when matched up against other compact cameras, it fares pretty well on that score too. The general image quality was good to great. Its performance was very much like you may expect from a big brand mid to high-end happy snapper. Things like color, contrast, dynamic range, saturation, sharpness, focus speed, and noise all fell right into general expectations for a shooter of this type. On a hardware level, it's a very nice camera with good consistency and quite a pleasant look to the images. Same goes for video mode too, although here there are some extra bells and whistles that are still quite rare indeed in this side of the market. In its basic default mode, you'll get very good looking 1080p video, easily the match for any compact camera and certainly even the best camera phone video. Things are crisp with nice fluid motion, and the compression is well controlled, so details are kept decently defined. There's a tendency for highlights to get a bit lost sometimes, but that's something you'll get on pretty much any compact camera with their comparatively small sensors. It's just kind of par for the course. And on the whole, there's nothing really to gripe on in video mode. It spits out a perfectly acceptable image, which is very usable for many kinds of projects. And the fun times come when you look at the video settings menu and discover that there's a whole selection of modes here. 720 of course if you want to get a bit more recording time by sacrificing a little bit of the resolution, even a basic 640x480 mode, although I don't know for what reason that's there. It's a nearly useless legacy resolution, but it's there. Select one of the other options to cut down the resolution a bit more and you get a couple of super slow motion modes, either 120 frames per second or as high as 240 frames per second. Things get pretty low res here, but they still look okay, and for some super slow-mo playtime, it's actually pretty damn cool. There is also a much more useful 720 60 frames per second mode, which gives you an extremely pleasant looking half-speed slow motion file while keeping plenty of resolution and sharpness. Bizarrely, there's even a 1080p 15 frames per second mode, which gives you a weird looking double speed result. Not really sure how useful that's gonna be, but it's certainly something fun to play with, and, well, let's face it, a camera like this is made for fun times and experimenting creatively anyway, so why not put it there? The microphone is what you'd expect on a compact. It's reasonably clear and deals with high and low volume nicely, but it's fairly thin sounding, and of course it'll pick up the noise of the zoom lens, which is, no, it's not terribly loud, but it's still kind of unpleasant. The basic camera interface even has a selection of built-in effects, although I can't imagine why. I mean, they work just fine and they look nice and everything, but you're running Android here. Why wouldn't you just shoot normally and use any one of dozens of much more advanced and flexible editing and filters apps? Bit of a weird choice there, but oh well, you don't have to use them. Speaking of the Android underneath, yes, any app that has access to the camera in a normal Android handset, like Instagram of course, will kick over to the full camera interface here and then snap back to the app once you're done. And everything works as you'd expect it to, except for the orientation. For example, here in Instagram, if you take something sort of portrait or landscape, it comes back to the app and it's a bit weird and wonky and pointing in the wrong direction. The bit of an unexpected glitch and quite annoying, really. But I guess once you're aware that it does that, you can, take steps to avoid it by not turning the camera sideways. There's a macro mode here too, which does a pretty nice job. It's not spectacularly good, but it's certainly good enough to get some cool close-up work done. There's even some rapid-fire shutter options if you're trying to capture some fast action. So everything seems pretty great so far, right? You get quite a good camera and you get the smart device fun times. Unfortunately, what should be a best of both worlds experience is compromised on both ends. On the camera side of things, you get much more severely limited than you are on most other cameras, even happy snappers. I was constantly annoyed by the lack of ability to manually set things like shutter speed and aperture, important things for creative control over a camera. There is a plus or minus 2-stop exposure compensation slider, which helps a bit in that respect, and I was using it constantly to manually alter the auto exposure metering to where I wanted it to be, but that was still quite a limited workaround to the problem. There's no way, for example, to do a nice long exposure shot, and I love doing those. You've got control over ISO sensitivity and some manual white balance options, but that's pretty much all Nikon are handing over. And frankly, for me, that's just not good enough. It was, very simply, the most frustrating thing about the camera for me. I felt constantly hamstrung and limited for no good reason that I could see. On the Android side of things, there's frustrations too, like the choice to go with an older build of Android. Gingerbread lives here, Android version 2.3, a few versions behind the latest one available. And Gingerbread comes from a time when Android was still pretty awkward and annoyingly inconsistent in some of its interface stuff. It also means you'll be increasingly more limited in what apps you can actually run, as more and more stuff gets updated for the latest Android and Gingerbread is left depreciated. For example, the Chrome browser, my personal choice of web browser and by far and away the best browsing experience I've found on Android. It won't run here. Gingerbread is too outdated for even Google themselves to build their own flagship browser to run on it. There were even a few image editors which either refused to install or just ran poorly or with restricted features under Gingerbread. And as an Android device for entertainment, it's got a couple of annoying omissions too. The built-in speaker sounds like crap and it's very low volume. And worst yet, there's no headphone jack at all. So forget trying to watch some video content or use it as a music player. No. It's got enough grunt to get your gaming on with decent ability. It's no Tegra 3 powerhouse, understand me, and the frame rate stutters slightly sometimes in 3D heavy rendering, but for that quick blast gaming stuff, you'll get served acceptably. Unless, of course, it's a game where you really need to hear what's going on and you're anywhere but a nice quiet room. But the worst failing of all was the battery. I was lucky to get 220 shots per charge. And just to put that into perspective, the average camera really should get somewhere around 350 odd shots per charge these days. That's kind of where things sit. So 220 is well below average. It's even less if I was taking video too. Even less than that if I was using Wi-Fi to upload pics, either at home or tethered to my iPhone's 3G connection, as the S800C is Wi-Fi only. This is not the camera you want for holidays or weekends away. The battery will be the bane of this camera's usefulness in those situations. But for those of you who just take a few shots a day and squirt them up to Facebook or Google Plus or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, it'll do just fine at that kind of stuff. That's not really demanding on your battery. So the life blogger type will get a lot of use out of this camera and be very happy with the results, I expect. Sadly, the Nikon S800C arrives with great promise of having a proper camera paired with all the connected goodness of a smartphone, but fails to deliver an experience worthy of the hope I held for it. It's a good enough camera, but the experience on both the camera side of things and the Android side of things is compromised in a few annoying ways which really get under my skin. The good news is, at least in theory, all complaints I had about the camera's limited manual control and the old Android version marring the experience and capabilities can both be fixed with software updates. I have no idea if that'll actually happen, but it is possible. The battery though, that can't be significantly amended with a simple patch, so I'd advise anyone snatching up one of these interesting but flawed little shooters should snap up a spare battery too. That is not an option, that is an essential thing as far as I'm concerned. Get a spare battery. The final word is just that. It's a very interesting but flawed camera. It's the first step, the version 1.0, and I hope very much that Nikon continue to evolve this line of thinking, because I honestly think that this is where the future of compact cameras has to live in a world of camera phones. The Nikon S800C isn't a do not buy. Like I said, within its restrictions, it's still a very nice camera with some very useful Android functions, and I'm sure some owners will be quite happy with it and find it extremely useful. I've no issues with the stills or video quality, they look great. But go in with your eyes open on this one, and definitely go hands-on with it before you hand over your money, because this one's not for everybody. Thanks for watching, I am Blunty, and I'll catch you next time.